Before I start this video, I'd like to say huge shouts to HQ Squad, massive shouts to the team. They've been a huge help in my videos. Also shouts to Nardic and some other people. They've also been helping me a little bit in this video too, and just getting some thoughts and insight from different people's perspectives. Captain Forest here. In today's video, it's going to be a little different, folks. My time looking into some of the Sonic verse and some of the scaling in terms of inverse, I was curious to see some takes and also some reasonings behind certain matchups, and the most popular matchup and kind of quite contentious one was Sonic versus Shadow, and I thought to myself, who would actually win? So I'm going to give my thoughts and interpretation on who really wins inverse in terms of general feats, raw statements, and just more consistency going into this. So let's go. So in early modern Sonic games, there are statements and some showings that both Sonic and Shadow are comparable to each other in stats, even in their fights, such as the time they battled in Green Forest, which occurred in Sonic Adventure Battle 2. In the Sonic Heroes game manual, there is a direct statement pointing out that Shadow is the dark incarnation of Sonic and matches Sonic in both speed and abilities, and in Shadow the Hedgehog there is also another statement which notes that Shadow's speed rivals that of Sonic's, and there is also another statement which is also solidified and made same again in Sonic Generations. There have been moments that imply that Sonic is above Shadow in Sonic Battle. When Sonic does battle with Emerald, Sonic is impressed by Emerald's power and acknowledges that Emerald has gotten stronger, but Sonic wasn't even going all out against Emerald. When Shadow does battle with Emerald, Emerald is able to still stalemate Shadow. Shadow in this point in time is at full power and he's not weakened. Shadow himself states that the battle between him and Emerald will determine who is the strongest, and with the additional context added to it, Shadow would not be holding back due to the fact that the whole point of the fight is to see who is the strongest, and Shadow would be going all out in this case. It would not make any sense for Shadow to hold back, and yet Emerald is able to still contend with Shadow, and Shadow even admits that Emerald is equal to him. In the final battle of Sonic Battle, Emerald starts bugging out due to having way too much power. Emerald also activated the final Egg Blaster, which was going to destroy Earth within 30 seconds. Base Sonic was going to use the Master Emerald in order to get Emerald under control until it was broken. Sonic says that we gotta give it a shot as Sonic is ready to go into the teleporter. Shadow does not follow and tells Sonic that he must go and defeat Emerald, and Shadow even hesitates to admit, saying that I am no longer, which kind of implies that he's not up to the task to beat Emerald. In this situation, I understand why people kind of make the argument that Sonic is above Shadow in this instance, just due to Shadow's hesitance. It just wouldn't make sense if Shadow was on Sonic's level, why didn't Shadow just go and fight Emerald too? But it was all down to Base Sonic, and this very same Base Sonic as well. He goes on to defeat Emerald in under 30 seconds, as that's how long Sonic had before the final Egg Blaster launched and destroyed the Earth. Another case that can be made for Sonic being above Shadow, and that is in Sonic Adventures Battle 2 during the final boss fight against the Bio-Lizard. When both Super Sonic and Super Shadow confront Bio-Lizard for the final time, there is some dialogue that Sonic and Shadow share during the fight, where Shadow states that he discovers what the ultimate life form is, and that it might be you, which he's referring to Sonic in this case. And with this statement, this has also been used by other Sonic scalers to refer Sonic as superior. However, this is a little contentious due to the real meaning behind the term ultimate life form, whether it's just a title that represents power or a higher purpose. I leave that up to you folks to decide in the comment section. In Sonic Colors for the DS, Omega states that according to the data, Shadow's abilities are equal to Sonic's. Shadow makes quite an interesting statement in response, noting that it just goes to show that data won't tell you everything. Now, this one for me leaves me a little bit conflicted. From different perspectives, this can mean a couple things. This can mean that there is some inaccuracies with the data and that it isn't 100% foolproof, which can be used to support that Shadow and Sonic being equal is potentially unlikely, or that there is more to Shadow than meets the eye. But this statement alone, for me at least, unfortunately leaves out too much to really come up with a strong cohesive conclusion, whether or not Shadow is even admitting that Sonic is better than him in this case. Now let's talk briefly about Sonic 06. The reasonings that I have heard and that has been put forward for why Sonic is above Silver and Shadow at first glance aren't very convincing, and can be argued to not really be the case at all, just due to lack of convincing arguments to suggest otherwise. We all know Sonic got beat up by Silver and had no way to deal with Silver's hexes, and Silver was literally able to keep pace with him, react to him in combat, etc, etc. Amy in fact had to jump in and stop the fight and stop Silver from dealing the final blow. You could make the argument that Sonic wasn't focused, or he was distracted or off guard, since he did have his back to Silver, and due to his concern for Elise's safety, he cared more about Elise's safety more than the fight itself, so that could affect Sonic's combat effectiveness and efficiency, so that could be an argument. However, we've seen later on in their second fight that Sonic literally puts down Elise and goes to square it with Silver, and Silver literally embarrasses him again, and then afterwards we see Shadow jump in afterwards and he takes the place of Sonic, so Sonic can go run off and save Elise when she unfortunately got captured again by Dr. Eggman. Silver and Shadow both go at it in combat, and they both show to do pretty relative to each other on both sides. So in this case, Shadow performs way better than Sonic in this context and in this point in time. We literally see them both stand off, showing signs of fatigue and effort, and both parties are at an impasse. Before the Chaos Emeralds were used, the argument can definitely be used to support Shadow and Silver being relative to Sonic during this time period. However, there is another conflicting thing that can literally just like potentially go against this and cancel this argument out, is if we use this statement which states that only the heroic hedgehog has the power and strength to defeat the fires and banish the living flame forever, and that Sonic played a very important role in defeating Solaris. This statement and the fact they needed the help of Sonic could be used to support Sonic overall. End of Sonic 06, just edging out more inverse wise, but Sonic 06 was a really weird time, and it's very debatable whether you believe the statement or not, or if you want to just go off raw feats. This, ladies and gentlemen, is actually shown a lot, folks, throughout the Sonic games. I've noticed that Sonic is always vital, or he's the only person that is strong enough to defeat whatever enemies that no other hero can deal with. This is shown in Sonic and the Secret Rings, as Sonic was stated and shown to be the only one who can defeat Eraser Jin, not Tails, not Knuckles, not Eggman, Silver, or even Shadow, or any other Sonic characters, specifically stating that Sonic is the only one. In Sonic Forces, some people misrepresent and misinterpret the Shadow vs Infinite fight. The Infinite that Shadow casually beat up was trash and didn't even have the Phantom Ruby then. The defeat at the hands of Shadow was what caused Infinite to seek strength, and he did so with the help of the Phantom Ruby. This Phantom Ruby Infinite is vastly above his base form, and with this power he views Shadow as an insect. This very same Phantom Ruby amped Infinite faces off against Sonic again, as Sonic is able to damage Infinite. Infinite is taken back by how strong Sonic has become, stating that Sonic's abilities have far exceeded his previous data, and Sonic notes that he continuously gets stronger every second, further reinforcing the fact that Sonic continues to get even stronger than last time, and that he always ends up being the one that needs to take down the final boss. Now, to address some other things. Now, as mentioned previously, there are statements that say that Shadow and Sonic are relative. Now, this can be challenged to basically not be the case, as there are multiple statements that clash with those other statements, such as the statements for Sonic, where it's stated that Sonic is the world's fastest hedgehog, which is a statement used to go against obviously the equal statements of Shadow and Sonic being comparable. This is all backed up if you go off superior feats, especially with Sonic Forces and other Sonic games like Sonic and the Secret Rings, and just Sonic always being the main character needing to get the job done. As for more supporting feats, in Sonic Frontiers, Sonic gains more abilities, his super form gets a buff, and just like I mentioned before, Sonic is the top dog and essential in taking down the threat where no other character has the power nor the power to defeat the said villain. Now, let's go over win-cons. Let's go over the first narrative. Now, the difference between Sonic and Shadow is that Shadow has a lot to work with in terms of his arsenal and versatility due to what he can do in a combat situation. If we go off the notion that Sonic is above Shadow in stats, I ultimately see Sonic beating Shadow with moderate difficulty. Despite Shadow having more to work with in terms of abilities, it isn't going to amount to much if the stat difference is too big. Now, if we go off the narrative that they're both relative and include the inhibitor ring arguments, Shadow would be unquantifiably stronger, and in my humble opinion, I do see Shadow winning that more often than not in that situation with very high difficulty. Even if we apply the inhibitor ring argument to a superior Sonic in the first scenario, I don't see them being very effective, as it would be a hard stretch to say or quantify the level of power that Shadow would reach, since Sonic would already be above him. So with that being said, I don't think the outcome would change a whole lot, and I'd still lean more so with Sonic. And even if we use like Sonic Forces for example, the quantification right there and there is pretty blatant, so the inhibitor ring argument is not very useful in that situation. There's just too much gray area for the inhibitor rings. It's not a clear straight quantification. Sonic would still be above him if we go off the narrative of Sonic just being above Shadow instead of the narrative of them being relative. Overall, in older games, there are some strange moments, some weird moments, and there are some interesting moments as well that could be made and implied or just blatantly show that Sonic and Shadow at certain points in time periods are equal. But for me, for the most part, it's shown to not be the case later on in newer games, and it just goes to show that Sonic currently is just way too strong for Shadow. He just keeps getting better feats, better abilities as well. Current Shadow unfortunately just doesn't have much currently lately. He hasn't done anything crazy. Shadow would more so just downscale from Sonic rather than being an actual equal to him for now. So unfortunately for Shadow, I gotta give it to Sonic. I've been watching other people's arguments. People say Shadow is not relative at all. There's people that say Sonic and Shadow are relative, and there's people that think Shadow completely beats Sonic. So it's up to you what interpretations you agree with. I definitely lean on the bench a little bit more with Sonic just being above Shadow, especially with current feats and more statements, and just the fact that Sonic is always the leading cast and he's always the one to take down these powerful beings, more often not on his own. But anyway, I gotta give this to Sonic. But thank you guys for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment down below, and yeah, it's been real. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.